begin with the breaking news overseas. 3 Americans held prisoner by North Korea are on their way home. They were freed today and walked on their own from a van onto the plane of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo at the end of his day-long visit that included a brief meeting with Kim Jong-un. President Trump is grateful for their release.
Right now, flying back are 3 what they were calling hostages. We call them fine people, 3 really fine people. Seem to be healthy. They'll be landing at 2 o'clock in the morning at Andrews Air Force Base. And I'll be there to greet them. Nobody thought this was going to happen. And if it did, it would be years or decades, frankly. Nobody thought this was going to happen. And I appreciate Kim Jong-un doing this.
Their return clears the way to an historic upcoming summit between the president and Kim Jong-un. Mr. Trump had some news earlier on when that meeting will be taking place.
We're going to announce that in 3 days, Joe. Within 3 days.
Within 3 days?
We're just working arrangements. But
will it be the DMZ?
It will not be there. A lot of good things can happen. A lot of bad things can happen. I believe that we have both sides want to negotiate a deal. I think it's going to be a very successful deal.
Greg, President Trump was not going to go to this meeting if these detainees were still being held by the North Koreans. So this was a smart move by the North Koreans if they really want to have it.
Mm-hmm. And it's good. I think the New York Times should be relieved to know that where Pompeo was. Because I believe they were like, where's Pompeo? Why isn't he here with the Iranian deal? Because he was doing something else.
We actually have Sarah Sanders on tape talking about that earlier today.
So did I jump the gun?
No, not at all. But it's actually the perfect segue. Let's listen to it.
Oh.
The fact that I'm standing here taking questions, the fact that the president took questions from your colleagues just 2 hours ago demonstrates this White House's commitment to accessibility and to providing information to the American public. At the same time, the press has a responsibility to put out accurate information. Just yesterday, the New York Times accused the Secretary of State for being AWOL. AWOL. When he was flying across the globe to bring 3 Americans home. That is an outrageous claim.
So there, she's making your point.
Yes, you know, I think the media may have to admit that despite all the flaws of Trump that they seem to cover obsessively on other channels, the United States elected a person with a unique skill set that is perfect for these kinds of events. He may not be Ward Cleaver. You know, he may not be Marcus Welby, MD, trying to hit the audience.
There we go again.
But he has a skill set that our past presidents may not have had, and it's time to move on and kind of accept that this is what he might be good at, get over the 2-year tantrum. We might need some anti-grief counselors in the media to cheer these people up.
Well, it is an interesting thing, Pete, that you have this historic opportunity, and you do wonder if people will be able to get over any sort of politics. I mean, politics it's infusing everything that we do at all times. But everybody can be happy that these 3 detainees are coming home.
The way you look at it, you're welcome for fire and fury. You're welcome for the bloody nose approach. You're welcome for the military exercises. You're welcome for all the fear and the craziness the so-called mainstream media had. He's going to bring us to nuclear Armageddon. No, he's not. He's going to scare the bejeebers out of Kim Jong-un. So he actually finally comes to the table and makes all these concessions up front before we even have a talk, which shows how serious they are about the fact that they believe that President Trump might actually take away their nukes or bomb them if necessary. That's the necessary prerequisite for actual peace. So it takes a perception of a crazy man to bring a real crazy man to the table to actually bring peace.
What's a bejeeber?
When will they figure that out? Bejeeber?
Yeah.
It's a very,
That's a military term?
No, it's a Midwestern term.
Yes.
He was following
pseudonym for something else.
He was following in Greg's footsteps with the whole demo thing. Next was like, what, Petticoat Junction, Mr. Rogers, Marcus.
But Juan, I do think that the president is willing to tap the brakes on people getting a little bit overly exuberant, thinking that world peace is at hand and the North Koreans are going to do everything that is asked of them when they come to the table. I mean, he does always say, you just heard him right before we started, there could be a lot of good things that happen, there could be a lot of bad things that happen, and he's trying to show everyone that like he's aware that the North Koreans have a penchant for lying.
Yeah, and he should be. But, you know, so I think everybody has high hopes that those people are in good health. Obviously, Arnold Warmbier was not in good health. The president, though, said people didn't think this could happen decades. I mean, these people have been held since 15, I think, is the longest, 17 for 2 of the people who are coming home. And you just thank God that this is happening, because we know that the North Koreans do not treat prisoners fairly. But I think it's a crazy narrative. Oh, it's because of President Trump's bellicose rhetoric that somehow you see the North Koreans suddenly acting more graciously. I think the fact is it's sanctions. I think it's pressure.
But was part of it?
Isn't that all part of it? You pressure China to impose sanctions?
We've had sanctions on.
But these are different.
Years.
These are sanctions on companies.
But, and then getting China, Kimberly, to come on board.
But I think that even with that, the president somehow, I mean, things get stepped on, you know. So yesterday it was the Iran deal. And by the way, New York Times in their story said Pompeo was on his way to North Korea to hopefully bring home 3 people. So I don't know why you want to pick on the Times. I think the
headline was different.
Okay, but anyway, the article.
I only read the headlines, Juan.
You only read the headlines.
I don't have time.
Okay,
I don't have time for your stories.
I know.
He's not content oriented.
Yes, I'm not
Headlines.
I'm a millennial.
You're with the people.
You're with the people. But the people. Meanwhile, also, we got the story about money, Russian money being funneled to Michael Cohen. It steps on again on the good news about the North
Another
Korea.
headline
only
devoid
in the CNN newsroom.
Oh,
that
no,
step on great news.
But do you see what happens here? See, Juan is like master. You got to keep your eyes on both hands, because he'll distract, he'll deflect, and you're like, wait a second. Were we just talking about
this is what the
how
facts,
amazing the
truth.
president's accomplishment is here? We should be celebrating the fact that these 3 Americans came home, good health, prosperity. That is what we want. Internationally,
Hopefully.
yes, and with information. So this is something, when you look at the type of diplomacy, it's almost like a destabilizing diplomacy that he engages in, because it isn't anything that anyone's seen before, experienced before, so it throws the other side off their game. They're not sure what to expect or anticipate, and that really is the secret to his success as it relates to foreign policy and what we've seen in terms of how he's handled himself diplomatically and working with other countries. Like, wait a second, we better take this seriously and pay attention, because he's liable to just do about anything. He doesn't go by the typical playbook that we've been used to seeing.
And Juan, you say he steps on his good news with other news. He steps on good news with more good news. So he scraps the Iran deal, and within that same day, he's bringing back 3 hostages in a way that opens up the possibility for possibly, you don't know, but an opening on the Korean Peninsula, which hasn't happened for previous administrations.
So I think of it just the opposite. I thought he was saying the good news is the release of the prisoners.
Yes.
And what he's done then, everybody instead is frightened about what is going on with Iran. Does he have a plan B? Does he have an understanding? We seem to have separated ourselves from the
voters are not
allies.
frightened at all.
Well, let me just say, I mean, the critics have been all over this, right? Especially the Democrats, right? So from President Obama all the way.
Can I intro? I have actually a little bit of sound on
right
that,
ahead.
because you guys are so good at moving me along today. President Trump is getting a lot of harsh criticism for pulling out of the Iran deal from leaders who helped negotiate it and other powerful Democrats. As Juan was saying, President Obama says the pullout risks eroding America's credibility. John Kerry says it breaks America's word, and Nancy Pelosi says it endangers global security, defies comprehension. So I'll turn to you, Greg, on that.
All right, so if you're mad about Iran and what happened, who should you blame? A, you blame Obama, who left his party in tatters, which enabled President Trump to be elected. 2, you blame Hillary, who thought the election was in the bag. So they assumed that this deal was going to stay because they were going to have Hillary in there. You got to blame Anthony Weiner because he presented the last scandal.
And we blame him for everything.
Exactly. So all of that, if you're mad, don't be mad at Donald Trump because he said he was going to do this. Be mad at yourselves for creating a deal that could be reversed. That wasn't really a deal, but just basically, not treaty, whatever.
It was like a handshake.
It was, but it's great. I can't tell who's more hysterical, the media, the Democrats, or the Iranians burning flags. I saw how the Iran Supreme Leader said that Trump's corpse will be worm food. I think he's auditioning for Morning Joe.
Oh, my goodness.
Because that's exactly what I hear on Morning Joe.
There is one curious thing, Pete, I'll turn to you on this, about why, the State Department had a person there, a political appointee there with the Europeans, trying to explain to them that they want to do a different deal, try to get to something where they could agree on the sunset provision. Remember, on this deal, on Obama's deal, it would sunset, and so
in 10 years,
the Iranians would be able to get a nuclear weapon right after that. And I'm curious if you have any insight as to what it was that the Europeans were so resistant about changing that sunset provision.
I think they're resistant about changing anything that throws a deal that they're totally invested in, that they feel good about the legacy of a deal that they got, that Barack Obama got, who's their international friend. And it's difficult to change a deal like that.
Well, they're also making a lot of money, Kimberly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of economic activity that was allowed under this deal.
Absolutely.
With the Europeans in particular.
Well, absolutely. So you can understand that. And when President Trump said, okay, I understand that, if I were them, I'd be upset too. But he's got to act in the best interest of the United States and what he sees as our, global future and the national security and safety of Americans and, quite frankly, the world. This was not a good deal. I would really shudder at the thought that a president who researched it, met with people, discussed it, and decided to make this decision didn't make it because he was afraid of the criticism, or that people would say, oh, wow, now look what you've done. You've torn down a legacy portion of Barack Obama. I mean, it wasn't well thought out to begin with. The president shouldn't stick in a bad deal. That's why he also pulled out of the Paris Climate Change Accord, because he analyzed it and he did the numbers. And as I said yesterday, and I just do not think that we should, in fact, fund a nuclear Iran, especially when they were not, honest as it related to their inspections or anything else. They're self-inspecting. It was absolutely ridiculous. So it wasn't something that was really good for the United States or, quite frankly, the world.
Well, let me just say, my concern, and I saw this in the papers today, is President Trump acting in the interest of the United States, as opposed to simply being vindictive and saying, I don't like Obama, I don't like the past deal, this is horrible, I'm a deal maker, I can create chaos and make people come to the table on my terms. Because wait a second, does it really make us more secure? Remember, twice this president has certified that Iran didn't violate any of the terms of the deal.
Each time,
the Europeans, we might have been reluctant, Pete. Wait, let me finish, Pete.
Okay,
so then the Europeans and the International Atomic Energy Agency all say no evidence of any violation. The president speaks yesterday. He doesn't have any evidence. Instead, he says, rotten deal, horrible deal. I'll get a better deal. But what do we see right now? We see the United States isolated from its allies. President Obama said the real choice here is a nuclear Iran, or we go to war, which is what, Netanyahu wants. We go to war with Iran to take them out.
He just hugged it out with Emmanuel.
That's destabilizing the Middle East.
He just hugged it out with Emmanuel Macron. Bibi Netanyahu loves the deal. We're not isolated from our allies.
So last word to Greg.
And you have to understand, this is the pattern that we've seen. He comes in, creates the chaos by turning the table over. That turns to a certain kind of uncertainty. So when you start to negotiate, the other side doesn't know what you're doing. And he's left the door open.
Right.
So this is I see this as kind of a replay of North Korea. The North Korea begins with chaos and uncertainty, and the media and the Democrats are going World War III. Oh, there's more likely to have war. This is a complete deja vu. We lived through this 6 months ago.
Let him do a new deal. I mean, okay.
A real good deal.
Let him do a good deal. Let him do a deal based on the benefit of experience, that what he's learned from this deal, what they think works and doesn't work. I'm not a big fan of, Iran self-certifying, saying, yep, no violations here from us, wink, wink, while they're continuing to build a nuclear Iran. That's the bottom line here. So let the president go through it, make strong choices based on facts and information. He did win the election. It is his prerogative. He's got a team in place now that he can work with to make some solid decisions as it relates to national security.
So the problem is you want to negotiate a deal with North Korea on, guess what? Nuclear disarmament. Oh, but we stepped out of a deal that we signed just a few years ago, and everybody in the world now is going to negotiate a new deal with Iran, because Iran apparently is interested in maintaining that deal for maybe many of the reasons that
They want the money.
It shows the world we want a real deal, not a bad deal.
Nobody says it was a bad deal except President Trump.
No.
And he says it was a political promise to do away with it.
We'll see what happens.